and welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast, where each week we meet a new and interesting person who is from the information security industry, and they tell us all the secrets of how they got to where they are today. And this week is sponsored by ThreadFix, which is powered by Denim Group. And our guest, which I know a lot of you have been waiting for, is Alyssa Miller. I'm super excited. So I'm not going to go on, and let's just bring her on out and say hi. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Really excited to be here. This is cool.
Thank
How are
you.
you? Let's do this.
Yeah, you have a new-ish job, and I was excited that we could talk about it because we haven't had anyone on yet who's a BISO. And when you first told me, like, I'm getting a new job and I'm going to be a BISO, I'm like, I am excited for you. What does the B stand for?
What does that mean?
I was wondering if you could, for people who are hiding under a rock, if you could tell them who you are and kind of what you do, a little bit about you, maybe your book even.
I can plug all sorts of good stuff. Hey folks, I'm Alyssa Miller. As Tanya mentioned, I am the Business Information Security Officer. That's what the B stands for S&P Global Ratings. And we can talk about what that means. But basically, I've been in security for 16 years. And before that, I was a developer. Lifelong hacker. I mean, I was breaking into Prodigy when I was 12 years old. Some of you, I'm sure we've met before on the Twitterverse, or we've met each other at conferences. I do a lot of public speaking, as I'm sure some people know. And yeah, that's really who I am. Long walks on the beach, yada, yada, yada. You get it.
Awesome. Could you tell us kind of like what your job is about? Because a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people watch this podcast so that they can learn not necessarily their next job, but a job they want to have someday.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it's funny because I knew when I took the job, I was going to get that same question that you had from so many people. So actually, I even wrote a blog about it. But yeah, Business Information Security Officer is kind of, it means different things in different organizations, quite honestly. It's a fairly newer role. But, in my case, and in what I think is the bulk of the cases, my role is similar to what a divisional CISO would do. So, a lot of companies, larger organizations, you have that like centralized security team, but then you've got CISOs that sit at the top of each, or over the top of each of the divisions or business units. So that's kind of what my role is. One thing that's a little different, though, is that I report into the technology team within the division. So the CTO, divisional CTOs, organization. And the focus of my role really is to kind of act as the bridge between our centralized security CISO organization and the business. So it's taking a lot of what, the security's pushing things down to you all the time, saying thou must do this, here's new standards, here's new tools, whatever, taking that and applying it to the business in a way that makes business sense. So, we're doing it as frictionlessly as possible and things like that. And of course, to do that requires a flow of information the other way. And that is really bringing the business context to the security team. So helping them understand, okay, yeah, we need to reduce number of open vulnerabilities. Well, let's talk about that. And let's talk about how we can do that and where that fits within, our pipeline and, with our particular SDLC and how to make that work.
That sounds hard.
It's not easy. It's a reasonably large, division that I'm in. So, there's lots of people to talk to. There's lots of things going on. We're in the middle of a just a huge transformation, not just to DevOps and CI/CD, but add in all the cloud native that goes with that. Add in a bunch of other strategic initiatives that have us working on things like applying blockchain in a practical way. Oh God, everybody talks about
What, you're using it properly? What?
actually using it for something other than, cryptocurrency. AI ML, of course, comes into play, especially when you're in an analytics. I said, global ratings being like a credit reporting agency. In our case, large organizations and countries as opposed to consumer credit. But so AI ML comes into play where there's a concerted effort to remove legacy applications, all this stuff. So there is a lot going on. So it's really complex. On the bright side, compared to like a CISO, I don't have to worry about a lot of the operational security side of it. So, like things like endpoint protection and whatever on our workstations, well, that's handled at that corporate level. There's not a lot that I have to do. There are some things, but, because obviously some of that does impact how we do our business. And so there are times where we, if we're putting in, some new DLP or something, that might be something that I have to be involved in and help facilitate some of those discussions. But yeah, so it's definitely complex. It's exciting. It's challenging, but it's also a heck of a lot of fun.
I feel like it would be kind of exciting to lead a team of professionals and like set goals and then go kind of smash those goals together. Like I'm imagining like Braveheart a bit, except for you look better in blue. And all the people are running behind you and they're like securing all the things. Am I imagining it? Like, is this like a regular day for you or no? Less?
I mean, it's a little less of that because, unlike a CISO, I don't have like a dedicated security, team within my division. So it's really, motivating. It's actually kind of interesting. So I came into this role and I thought like the bulk of my focus would be, how do I really bring the security message in a credible way to the business, right? How do I get them motivated to do the security things and, work on AppSec and get them up to speed and whatever. Yeah. And there is definitely that part of it. But surprisingly, it's the other half of what I explained in my job that's taking up the majority of my time really is working with the security team and trying to help them understand, how we need to structure their security initiatives to fit into what our business is doing, how to make things, this is a funny way to say it, but more frictionless. I'm spending a lot of time there as well, which is not a bad thing. Because, hey, security people talking to security people, but just trying to build that empathy from their side to really understand, like, look, here's the business. This is how we function. Here's, our massive regulatory environment that we have to deal with. And then on the flip side, I do have, this massive engineering organization that's going through and doing all these really cool things with a lot of exciting technologies. And so being able to get in early with them on a lot of these projects where they're asking the questions. I just had a meeting on one of these yesterday, kind of that architectural planning, like we want to do this thing, but we don't want security to yell at us and say we can't. So how do we do this in a way that's going to work? And that's where it's a lot more of like that. It's really collaborative. It's a lot of fun because I'm getting to see a lot of really cool technologies and learn things that, I never really got a lot of exposure to before.
That's cool. So what is the average day like? Because I find a lot of us are surprised when people tell us what the average day is like. Like we had someone on last week and she was saying she has to make a presentation almost every day. And I was like, what? I didn't know that was a thing you'd have to do. I was like, that's a lot. And it didn't occur to me before. So like, could you tell us what, like an average day might be like in your job?
It's a lot of meetings. Quite honestly, it's a lot of meetings because there's a lot of stuff to be done that way. And it's, so more than anything else, I mean, I don't have to do a lot of presenting. A lot of what I'm doing is that consultative work. So we've got, weekly Scrum meetings that I'm involved in. We, of course, have weekly planning meetings. We have monthly board meetings that I need to be involved in. And those will start to become more presentations for me at certain times. And there have been already, some of those where I've had to present different topics to the board for one reason or another. There's definitely, like I said, a lot of these meetings are just, hey, we're sitting down to plan something. We're looking at the architecture of something. We're updating a standard, and we want to make sure that we get that standard or that SOP laid out properly. Right now I'm working through just trying to build my roadmap for, from a security perspective, what is our security strategy going to be across this division? And so a lot of that right now, when I'm not in meetings and things, is really looking, even in this turns into meetings sometimes, but trying to build out like a real understanding of our current maturity. And then, okay, how are we going to build from that? So, so there's a lot of tactical stuff because a lot of those meetings are also regulatory. There's generally 2 or 3 regulatory or audit reviews that are going on at any one time, just because we are so heavily regulated being a credit reporting agency.
I guess that makes sense.
Think about it, honestly. If we release a credit rating that's inaccurate, we can screw up the economy of a significant country, and so there is a lot of, we have to be regulated well, and we have to do the right things. And so it's, it's interesting because no day is ever quite the same, because there's always something new. And so it's a good mix of those tactical things, but then also really working on building out this strategy and just trying to, hey, connect with my organization, let them know too, like, hey, I'm here to help you. I can make life easier so you don't have to deal with the security people that you kind of have this combative relationship that always seems to show up. Let me take that. I'll work with them and, make this work between the two of you.
It almost feels like, so I know I'm simplifying, but it almost feels like you're a translator, but also at the same time like a peacekeeper.
Yeah, there's some of both. And it's funny, I just, with my CTO today, had exactly that conversation about a situation like that, where I was on a call with someone from our analytics team, and and someone from our information security team. And, the information security team is kind of saying like, well, we got to do things, they got to be done this way, and this is how it has to be. And on the other side, you got the business is like, yeah, well, it can't be that way, and I'm going to escalate. And you know what? If you do that, we're just going to find a way around it. And I'm like, whoa, slow down, and kind of talk to both sides. Like, all right, let's think about this. Let's understand. Security, you need to understand. Here's the business concern, but business, you also need to understand your business is enabled by more than just this situation you're thinking about. And there's this bigger situation that security is trying to help with that you're not seeing. You're missing the bigger picture, right? And so that's a lot of it. It is that translation and a little bit of peacekeeping just to help people understand, like, look, we're actually all on the same side here. We all want to do the right thing. It's just how do we get there, and how do we make sure that we're doing things in a meaningful, methodical way and for the right reasons. Security understands if the business can't do the business, they might as well not have jobs, right? We're not making money, you guys don't work anymore. So, they get that, but it's just, it's finding that nice balance.
We have a bunch of good questions in the chat. So,
all right.
From Dwayne, we have, do you have a direct line to the CEO in your position?
As far as like, can I pick up the phone and call him? If I really wanted to, yes. I'm probably not that tight with the CEO. Divisional president, absolutely. Anybody in my executive committee at the divisional level, most of the executive committee at the organizational level too. Just honestly, I just haven't had the opportunity to really build much of a relationship yet with the CEO. So I probably wouldn't unless it was something really significant. Yeah. But, in the situation where if I really needed that level of escalation, yeah, I would feel empowered to reach out to the CEO as well.
Cool. We have another question from Dwayne. So, how was or is your position received by IT middle management and executives? Because I totally see people being like this huge sigh of relief, like, she's here.
So
But what do you think?
thankfully, I wasn't the first BISO at S&P. There,
Okay.
one of my peers in a different division was the first, and I know there was definitely some resistance from the IT side. There's still some, but now that I'm here, and then another division just hired their first BISO. So we've got three of us now, and it's starting to take shape where like we can unite and come with a collective vision of here's what we need from the business side, and we can have more productive conversations with security instead of security trying to have one conversation with one division, then have another conversation with another and then the other. And so we've now established those weekly touch points where we bring all of those BISOs together with the InfoSec team, and we talk through things, and that's been really productive. And I think it's helping with some of that concern of, because there was some resistance. My understanding, as they were launching these BISO positions, was there was some resistance. But I think from the executive level, I think they enjoy it. I know within my division they do. My CTO, he's the one responsible for creating it in our division, so he was very happy to bring it on board. But definitely working with like our CRO, the division president, and then
What's CRO stand for?
Chief Risk Officer. So
Okay,
I
perfect.
work a lot, as you can imagine. I work a lot with both our divisional CRO and the corporate CRO as well, because I mean, a lot of anything security is generally going to tie to risk somehow, and so there's a lot of connection. And in fact, our CISO reports to that corporate CRO. So again, a lot of chance for that type of relationship building as well.
Cool. We have another, again, totally awesome question from Dwayne. So he was saying, like, what types of topics do you feel should be taught in like IT courses or business courses for InfoSec majors and business majors, right? Because risk is a part of business, and InfoSec applies to every business now, right? And what types of training programs might prepare someone so they could become a BISO someday? I know this is a
Wow,
long
that's like
question.
3 questions in one. Dwayne is hot tonight. I mean, from the IT perspective, if I'm thinking like networking courses, or I'm thinking, developer type things, it's just security basics. Like if we could just get into some of that coursework and just instill some of like those core concepts that we learned, the things that they teach you like on the CISSP, right? Just get some of those, like, here, understand the domains, these basic concepts of like least privilege or zero trust now. What is IDM? What does this even mean? What is identity management even talking about? Why is that important? What is a SIM, and what does that kind of thing do? Just, even if it was just one course to give people that understanding. And then, from the dev side, boy, would that be great, right? Like if we actually did some level of secure coding discussion. I mean, you're never going to teach them everything. I mean, I'm not saying take it down to here's how you prevent prototype pollution in your Node.js app. Like let's not go there. That might be a bit extreme, but just again, some of the basic concepts. Are we teaching them the OWASP top 10 for Christ's sake?
Yeah.
And then as far as a BISO, I think it's wide ranging, right? I mentioned CISSP. Like you do, I think, have to have an understanding for all of those domains, and definitely a particular focus, most depending on the organization, but most often probably around AppSec, because generally organizations that are launching BISOs as a role, it's because they're doing some type of product development. And so having that background of understanding application security and how does that fit into a DevSecOps pipeline? How do we enable that in CI/CD? How does cloud native completely shift the discussion, and what are the differences when we're dealing with that? Those are really important concepts when you're dealing with a product or software development organization.
Yes. Okay, so Rob has followed up on that question. So I like how they're asking the questions I was going to ask later in the interview. It's good. So Rob's seen a lot of interest in cybersecurity from university students who are pursuing management information science or information management. That's usually like how I've heard in Canada.
Sure.
So people management information science degrees, what are key skills that you might suggest for them, like to try to focus on?
So if it's someone that got an MIS degree or is in an MIS program and they want to get into security, big thing is understanding the risk side, right? So, I have a degree similar to MIS, a different name, but basically the same thing. And, I remember when we talked risk, it was organizational risk, and that's all we talked about. And it was very short-lived. We didn't spend a lot of time with it. So if you can speak to technology risk and then business risk and relate the two together, that's super critical. Because, that's like 90% of the conversations I have is tying together, okay, here's this technology risk. We understand, hey, there's this new, vulnerability that Microsoft patched on Tuesday. And so we got to get these patches applied. But we've got these business things that are standing in the way. So how do I balance that? How do I take this technology risk, translate it to the business risk, and make an informed decision, or inform the executives and all the other folks that need to be making that decision, at a higher level even than where I'm at? And that's, so I think just gaining that knowledge, and then it like anytime you're in any role in security, the more technical background you can have in different technologies, great. But I don't even feel like that's necessarily the primary thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I have spoken to a lot of people who work in InfoSec, and they're like, I have never written one line of code, and look at me now. I've got like this awesome job. I do lots of stuff. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah,
We
there's
have
so
more
many roles
questions.
here that don't require like hardcore technical knowledge of specific
Yeah.
technologies.
Yeah, I was explaining to someone this week how InfoSec tends to really try hard to attract veterans because they have all of this knowledge built into them from being in the military. Like they understand need to know and so many other important concepts that you don't need to learn because you already know them, right? And I'm just like, yeah, it's really ideal because veterans have theoretically left the Army and probably would like employment, and we're like, yes, come on over. So there is another question. Someone says amen to that. So we have another question from TCP Dump 101. So as someone who works in a smaller company, what challenges or solutions do you find regarding communication between the teams in a large or divisional org and ensuring you're all on the same page? Because it sounds like that's the biggest part of your job.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I understand this question. So they work in a smaller company,
And they want to
but what do I
understand
see
what's
at the
like in a bigger
larger level?
company.
So I'll try and try to compare and contrast a little bit. Because I've worked in both, right? I've worked in very small organizations. I work in massive, organizations where I find myself in now. And, I think in a large organization, there's usually just a lot of people that need to be involved in communication, right? I mean, you're sending information out. It's generally not going to one or two people. It's going to 30 or 40 or 50 people. And so that can be challenging sometimes to really get the right message across to everybody so they understand it in their context. That can be a real challenge. There's also, it's a little harder to understand the individual motivations of people when you're communicating at that broad scale. Whereas in a small organization, it tends to be more ad hoc and less methodical, which can be challenging. But you generally know the people a little bit better. You might be, you're not dealing with large teams. You're maybe reaching out. There's that one person who's responsible for this thing. And so maybe that 40, 50 person email goes to like maybe 5 people or less. And so, that leads itself to more agility, which from a security perspective can be a double-edged sword, right? It means, hey, we can fix things really fast when there's a problem or there's something that we need to address. But it also means that, boy, problems can get created really, really fast, because when you're moving that quickly, that's a problem. Now, so one benefit of a large organization is that so much of that communication is methodical. You probably have workflows that are built around it and make sure that, in order for, things to go from, okay, this is, hit our definition of ready. How do we get that deployed? And, the steps of change management and all those things that may not be there in a smaller organization. You got to do that in a large organization. There's oftentimes the more mature ones have those workflows and things built in. And if you're really good, like where we're going right now in ratings, is getting all of that automated in your pipeline. That's like now you're talking like the holy grail, right? And so that's like the cool stuff that we're doing right now, that like, that's what gets me so jazzed up and excited in this role, is that we're doing all this really cool stuff that, people have been talking about, and I've seen them talk about it at conferences and stuff, but it's just so nice to actually be hands-on doing it, especially after being a consultant for a long time, where, I was telling other people how to do it, but it was really up to them to do it. Now it's like, cool, I'm in the driver's seat a little bit. I'm sitting next to somebody else is driving, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat riding along, whatever you want to look at it. And that's really cool.
Yeah, being able to make a big positive impact in the place where you work, it's very satisfying.
It is. And honestly, the other thing, and this is kind of a selfish, almost maybe a little narcissistic, but, when you're in like consulting, you're generally in a consulting practice. You're in a team of all experts who do this every day. So in the role I'm in now, it's kind of interesting because I am the person with the security background, right? I mean, they're not the only one that understands security by any stretch, but I'm the one with the security background that people are counting on to really drive the security strategy and to push this stuff forward. So it's kind of a cool experience that way too. Not only do I get to own all of this, security strategy, but I've got people coming to me asking me what, hey, you're the one that we're trusting with all of this. It's not like, trying to change the course when you're in a consulting organ. Everybody gets it. And, you don't have that opportunity to impart wisdom as much, I guess.
Yeah. No, it feels good. Okay, I'm going to take a very, very brief moment to thank our sponsor, ThreadFix. ThreadFix are the most stupendous vulnerability management system this side of the galaxy. And I also want to invite everyone to come this Saturday at noon Pacific time to come hang out and talk about chapter 4 in my book, Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. We are going to talk about secure coding. I know everyone's shocked about the subject matter. Obviously, I need to be nerdy. And my friends are going to show up with me, Sharif Kusa from the Ottawa OWASP chapter, and my friend Aaron Lord from Hella Secure. And so if you want to join us, you can see below, it's like AlyssandBobLearn.com, or just go to YouTube and go to the She Hacks Purple page, and we'll be there being nerds for at least an hour or two. Okay, but back to Alyssa. Let's talk to Alyssa. We did the thing. Okay, so I have more questions, as you might have imagined. The audience did not guess all of them yet. So, and someone says, Ahmed says, Alyssa, you aren't being narcissistic. Being the head SME means you get to drive your vision, and that is amazing.
That is very, very true. And that is absolutely one of the things that was most attractive about this particular role, was having that ability. Here's a quick little secret. When I got this job, I also had an offer for a director of application security. And that's why I chose this job over that one, because that would have been amazing too. It was, director reporting directly to the CISO, but it was still going to be the CISO's kind of vision. And, this is an opportunity for me to really be sitting at the top of that strategy. and to really shape things the way that I believe they need to be done. So yeah, I mean, spot on as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so I have more questions about how someone someday could so they could try to steer themselves to get towards this goal. So, what kind of personality traits or maybe aptitudes does a person need to be good at being a BISO?
Ooh. Okay, are you ready for this? Here we go. All right, let's get started. The first and foremost, is empathy. If you are not an empathetic person, it doesn't work, because you need to be able to see both sides or all sides of these conversations. So you've got to have the empathy to understand what is security thinking, what's important to them in this moment, why are they behaving the way they are, why are my engineers acting the way they are, behaving the way they are, what's pushing them right now, what are they dealing with that's problematic, what are my SREs dealing with right now that's got them so flustered that they're torn up, why is the risk organization coming and pushing this thing so hard when it seems frivolous to me? All of that is so crucial. First of all, just having that empathy and being able to take yourself out of yourself for a moment and just put yourself in their shoes and really understand what's motivating them and how to speak to them in their language, which goes to the second point. You actually used a term that I use, which is that translator. You need to be able to translate between the language of, say, your executives and your engineering teams, because security in general needs to be better at that, because we don't do a good job of it. But definitely in this role, that's something you got to be able to do. I mentioned I have multiple board meetings every month, because it's not just Exco, it's not just, I've got regulatory boards I have to meet with. We've got subsidiaries in organizations around the globe. Some in which case where I'm actually named as like the head of security for regulatory purposes in those organizations. And so, to do that, you've got to have that ability to speak at those different levels, especially when you're dealing with regulators. And so I think, those are critical aspects. And then the last thing is just your own self-awareness, like really being able to challenge your own biases and understand in a moment where, you're trying to push something forward and it's not working, take a step back and look at yourself and what is it that I might be doing wrong, or what could I do different? Well, I'm frustrated because I can't get budget to do this security thing. Well, what could I do better to sell the reason why we need to spend that money? And, I think that self-awareness and that willingness to just self-analyze is something you don't see a lot of in security. Quite bluntly, I don't think a lot of security people are willing to do that. And so that can be problematic too.
A thing you said earlier, and a word that has come up over and over and over again in this podcast, is empathy. I feel like if you don't have empathy, you couldn't be a good BISO.
I don't think you could. I mean, you're literally there to bridge that gap, right? To help people understand, like you said before, kind of that peacekeeper role. That doesn't work if you don't have empathy for both sides of the discussion, and it's never going to work. I mean, I told you about that situation before where, I had a person from my analytics team and I had a person from the InfoSec team, and I'm trying to bridge that. The only reason it worked was because I could understand what InfoSec was trying to do, and I knew what the challenges were. I definitely understood why the business was upset and what they wanted to see. And it was just, all right, now I'm going to help the two of you see the bigger picture on both sides. InfoSec, don't tell me you can't do this thing, because we need it and it does have to happen, and there are ways to do it. Business, understand that this isn't going to necessarily look exactly the way you want it to either, and here's why. And oh, by the way, all those regulators that you have to answer to, we're helping you with that by doing it this way instead. Things like that. That's the kind of thing you need to be able to do as a BISO.
Yeah. We have some people in the chat asking if I have asked the cheese question yet.
Oh, no.
And we're going to get to it. So,
question. Shit. Oh God.
so in the very first episode, so one of the questions is does your job pay well? Because in our industry, a lot of people have been shocked to find out. For instance, a lot of people think bug bounty hunters make mad cash, and no, turns out they don't. Or, that a journalist does not necessarily do that well, versus security architects is where it's at from what I can tell so far. Like, I am a startup founder. We do not roll around in giant bundles of cash trying not to get paper cuts until our second year. Just, no, but like, I think like a lot of people have been really confused about how much different roles pay. Not like as in how much money do you make, but does it pay well? And so to bridge the gap, I talked about cheese because so I grew up poor and then I put myself through college working 2 jobs. And then I got a software developer job. Yes. And then one day I realized I went to the grocery store and I was like looking at 2 different types of cheese. I'm like, oh, they both look so good. I don't know which one to get. And then I realized I made enough money that I could buy both. And I didn't have to count every single penny at the grocery store anymore. And I was like, I've made it. I'm rich. I can buy both cheese. And so that's when I realized, in my opinion, that I'd made it. And so I guess, yes, someone is saying cheese, cheese, glorious cheese. There are a bunch. And there's an awesome question from Kellen that I'm going to get to after. But does being a BISO pay well? Is it like, a journalist or a bounty hunter, or is it more like a security architect where I believe one of the security architects we had on the show, she said, I have a pool boy. I'm like, do you have a pool? She's like, yes, I have a pool. Because I was like, maybe she just has a pool boy. I don't know.
So I mean, again, remember that BISO means different things in different organizations. But in a role like mine, given the responsibility, yeah, it does pay well. I mean, again, think about it. I am, it's like executive junior or junior executive. Do they still use that term? But like, so I'm not maybe necessarily a true executive, but I have that kind of purview, right? I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm reporting into boards. Okay. I'm going to executive committee meetings. I'm doing those things. And I've got a division that makes billions of dollars a year. And I'm responsible for making sure that division is secure at the end of the day. Yeah. I've got help from my corporate security team and they do a lot of the things that need to be done. I've got engineers and architects within our cloud architecture teams and whatnot who do a lot of the heavy lifting of the work. But yeah, I'm there to really, bring that. So it does pay what I consider well. And I think that, it's a valid question and it's a good one. I mean, it would be more toward, I'm in that architect range or higher, quite bluntly. If I was going to, so yeah, I mean, and that's one of the really exciting things is, holy cow, here I am, and I find myself in a great position. I've had a few of those cheese moments myself, where, I realized like, which one do I get? Well, screw it. I'll buy both, and
Yeah.
so why not? It's good to be in those situations for sure. And, but it's, of course, like you would expect, or like people glorify, it is the result of a long-term, a long career. I mean, 25, 26 years in tech now. So yes, get the cheddar and the Gouda. But make sure it's smoked cheddar and smoked Gouda if you watched last night when I was on Unicorn Shelf.
We have a really interesting question in the chat, but it's a hard one, and it's from Kellen.
I don't like easy questions, so let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So how do you refocus when you lose perspective? Or because you were talking about self-reflection, which is a thing that a lot of adults just never do, especially the ones that need it the most. But like, how do you refocus and realize when you need to analyze or readjust your approach or your biases?
So I'll answer it in reverse order. So first of all, it's just how do I catch it? And really, you usually catch it when you feel yourself getting frustrated. if I'm like, I feel like somebody's just not getting it. I mean, how many times do we say that to ourselves? Oh, my boss just doesn't get it. The executives just don't get it. Management just doesn't get it. I mean, I can't count the number of times I see tweets that say things like that. That's a perfect time to catch yourself and be like, okay, what could I be doing that might be contributing to that? And then it's really taking ownership. So when you say that to yourself, you're kind of now taking ownership of, okay, how can I take this situation and improve it? What can I do to make it so that management does get it? How can I present the argument or the discussion or whatever it is in a way that they're going to see it the way I want them to? Because that's what happens so often is we go in there, we're preaching one thing because this is what speaks to us and this is why we're concerned. But that doesn't mean that that's why your CIO or why your CEO or your CFO are going to be concerned. So think about what they need to hear that concerns them. So that's the thing. It's taking that step back, first of all, catching it when you get frustrated, but then owning that and saying, maybe this is my fault. Maybe there's something I can do better. Now, sometimes that's not going to be the case, right? But that's how you get the self-analysis started, is by taking ownership and saying, I want to figure this out. I want to figure out what I could have done better. Great example. I'm going to keep, I guess, harkening back to this discussion, but where I had my analytics guy and I have the InfoSec guy, and I'm on the phone with these two. Afterwards, I reached out to say, like, all right, what can I do? I reached out on the business side. What can I do to help you guys understand my role better? What can I do to build more trust with you that you'll let me, defend you and have your back in these conversations and not feel like you have to, get that, aggressive with the security team? How can I start to work with you guys more collaboratively? That's how I brought it to them. I could have just as easily gone and said, you guys can't talk to security that way. That's counterproductive. Don't do that. This is awful. But no, it's, hey, help. Oh God, here's the bad Jerry Maguire quote. Help me help you, right? I mean, that's really what it is. How can I, help me to help you guys here and do this a little better? So that was a case where it's like, I can see they're frustrated. They don't want to deal with security. So let me do it. Just help me understand how I can get you to trust me. So that's a one example of how you can do that, just turning it back on yourself.
This is really good. We have we have more questions and I have more questions. So I'm going to ask one of Dwayne's questions. Then I'm going to ask one of my questions because the audience is having so many good questions. I'm like, oh, that is a really good question.
Awesome.
And Kellen says, thank you. That was very helpful.
Good.
Okay. So from Dwayne, excellent question. What resources do you use to stay up to date on what's going on in industry or new trends or threat intel sources, or like, what do you do to stay up to date? Because there's so much out there.
Twitter. I'm kidding. No, actually, I'm not totally kidding, though, because Twitter is a useful tool for that, right? I mean, it is really good to hear some of the conversations that are going on out there. Even when it's the usual dumpster fire that Twitter turns into, there's still some things you can take from that. I have my news feeds that I enjoy, sites that I like to read. Like Dark Reading is one of my favorites. TechCrunch has their security section, which is hit or miss, but they have some things that I like to read. So I've got all that sort of thing. Some of it is just playing around with technologies. I asked a question about Postgres the other day on Twitter and didn't really get the answer I wanted. So finally, I spun up a VirtualBox environment and I installed Postgres and I set up another box with Nmap and I figured out what was going on and confirmed that it was what, a couple people had speculated on and that I thought it might be, but, confirmed it. So sometimes it's just stuff like that. Like I haven't played with Postgres in years. So, just even sitting down with that and having a reason to do that, I never going to be aware of all of it. Of course I get like threat feeds and stuff at work. So that's helpful with like emerging threats and stuff. We, like many large organizations, subscribe to multiple threat feeds. And so we've actually got a really cool communications team that collates all that together and gets that all sent out. So, that's really helpful too, because I don't have to read 10 different threat posts or something to try to figure it out. It's just right there in a nice summarized set of points. But, so things like that are all helpful.
Cool. Okay, now my question. So it's a two-parter and it's really hard. So the first part's easy and the second part's hard. So the first part is, what do you like best about your job? And then the second part, the hard part, is what do you like the least? Because there's usually a thing where it's like, and I hate the fact that I have to do blah, or all these report writing, etc. So best and worst parts of the job.
All right. So let's. So the best part by far is just all the cool technologies and cool people that are experts in these technologies that I get to work with every day. Seriously. I mean, again, I'm talking about the fact that we're making actual practical use of blockchain. That to me is super exciting. The work that we're doing on AI and ML and how that's going to play into a lot of what will ultimately make our analysts' lives easier. I love that. I mean, I love what we're doing. The thing, honestly, that I dislike the most is probably not going to surprise anybody, and that's just the level of regulatory review that we have to deal with. And that's just that's a product of being in hundreds of countries, and many of them, at least not all, but many of them have their own regulating bodies, and so you've got to deal with them, whether it's the SEC here in the US, ESMA over in the EU, UK just spun up their new FCA, so they got theirs. In Singapore, it's MAS. I mean, I can go on and on and on, right? I've got regulators in Russia and China, Hong Kong, you name it, and we have to deal with all of these. And of course, all their regulations look different. Plus, you're dealing with third-party audits and things like that, like you would in any organization too. So, like I said before, there's like 2 or 3 reviews going active at any one time. It's a lot to have to continually respond to these things. And of course, that's one of the things I would like to improve upon is how could we be better and more proactive, and maybe not automate this necessarily, but have easier ways of gathering and supplying the evidence that these different organizations need to see from us.
Oh, that's cool. Because I feel like, so to get slightly off topic, so in the cloud, there's a bunch of kind of new cool things where you can choose certain regulations and say, apply this policy. And it's never complete. It's never all of the checks, but some of the checks. And I bet that you could make your own custom policy.
And we've looked at some of that. I mean, there's, obviously, there are, whether you're in AWS or Azure or I'm sure GCP probably has one too. I don't know what theirs would be, but, there are different policy orchestrators and things like that where you can manage a lot of that. And they do have, the problem is, I mean, I fear that would turn into a bit of trying to boil the ocean almost, because again, there are so many regulations and they are, so varied from one country to the next. And then, on top of that, there's weird dynamics when you get into the regulatory environment too. Like you like to assume that a privacy regulation in Russia is all about the consumer, but it's Russia. Why would Russia care that all the data is stored in Russia? I wonder. Probably not just about protecting consumer privacy anymore now, is it? And so you have to be aware of those kinds of things too, because when you're dealing with these regulators and stuff, even if I grabbed a policy in AWS and I apply it, if it doesn't hit all the things, there might be that thing that's really important to that regulator because of who's behind the scenes. And so, and those motivations are everywhere. Again, that's kind of that empathy thing, or just being able to analyze the situation at a higher level and understand that, okay, there's more at play here than just me having to demonstrate that we're protecting private data. They want to know that it's stored on their shores so that it's subject to all of the legalities and everything that comes with it by it being in systems that are, within Russia and not, somewhere else.
This is good. We have another question from Dwayne. Then I have a question, then we have to wrap up because somehow time has fast forwarded very quickly. I know, right? So Dwayne's question is really good. And it also lines up with one of my questions that I didn't have time to ask. So I think it's the best question that's in the chat. So he said, based on your example with Nmap and Postgres and being able to do your own testing, do you feel someone would make a better BISO if they have a technical background, like a hands-on type of technical background?
So I guess it's a hard question because I almost like better than what. I think it's a good asset to have? Yes. Absolutely. Being able to understand the technical pieces of it. I mentioned that peer of mine who's been in her role for almost 3 years now. She's really super technical and amazing when it comes to cloud technology, way, way better than I am. And I'm learning so much from her. And I see where it pays off in certain situations, because when you're dealing with the people who manage those environments, or, they're telling you certain things, it's good to be able to, quite honestly, to call BS at times, and to say no, or to be able to competently understand it enough that you can propose an alternative solution. So maybe even what they're telling you is truthful, but it's just they see the world one way, and you can look at it and say, well, I happen to know there's this other way to do it. What do you think about doing this? And those become really productive discussions. So that's important. But, if you have that skill, but you lack the what I would call executive presence, you hear that term tossed around a lot, but that ability to be able to take technical and speak up to the executive level, then I don't know that it gains you so much, right? So, I can't say that it's better. It's a good asset, but at the same time, somebody who's really good at executive presence and can understand the tech even without being hands-on with it might also be better. Hard to say. So
yeah. Okay. Now I get to ask my question. If you were going to give someone, so let's say someone's watching this show or they're listening later, and they are wanting to become a BISO someday, what would you suggest as a first actionable step to try to kind of go towards that?
First actionable step. So they're starting new? Is that the hypothetical?
Yeah, so let's say they're in some other area of InfoSec and they're like, I think I want to be a BISO someday.
I think boy, how do I put this into something really actionable though? That's the tough one, right? Because I could give lots of advice, but I think, the way to step into that, probably the most actionable way, is to really start to pay attention when you have those opportunities to be in a meeting or a conversation with someone from outside the technology organization, because those are the people you really need to be able to communicate with effectively. And that's that. I used that term and I cringed when I said it, executive presence, but that's what we're talking about. It's, can you communicate it? And it ties back to all the other stuff. Like I said, empathy and this and that and all the other things, it ties into that, because can you understand what's on their mind and then be able to communicate to them in a way that speaks to them, and just use the language that's important to them and that makes sense to them too. When you're talking about business risk, if you don't understand, terms like residual risk versus inherent risk, okay, those are things that at a business level they understand and they want to hear things in that way. The other thing I would say you could start to do is really work on building your ideas for how to quantify things. I know it sounds kind of rudimentary and weird and like, okay, metrics or something. Is that what you're saying? Well, yeah, but providing anything in a quantifiable way doesn't necessarily have to be numbers, but
Okay.
what your executives are looking for is to be able to quantify risk, to be able to quantify business value, all of these things, just so they can compare them and make an educated decision. And so when I say that, to start practicing that, it's take a look at things where normally you just say like, okay, this is, this is bad, this is good, whatever. How can you start to really develop a way to communicate that in a sense that says, okay, this is at this level, this is at this level, this is at this level, therefore XYZ. Because that's what's equipping your management with the decision-making factors they need. And when you can do that, now you establish yourself as a leader. You're going to accelerate quick. Like they're going to see that, and that's what they want to hear. That's going to accelerate you up the ladder, if you will, if that's what you're trying to do, just by the fact that you're going to be communicating. And by the way, it's going to make your life easier because you're going to have less of those frustrating moments where you're saying to yourself, they just don't get it, because you've already given it to them in the way that they do get it.
That's such good advice.
I hope it's useful.
Thank you. No, it is useful. Okay, so we have to wrap up, but I'm going to ask one more question. So let's say someone wants to know more about you. They want to follow you. They want to see what's coming up with you, other things you may want to flog. Please tell us.
So, easiest way to follow me is on Twitter. I know we've had my my Twitter handle up there a few times.
Let's say it out loud for those who are listening.
So it is at Alyssa, Alyssa, at Alyssa M_infosec. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. You can also go to my website, which is alyssasec.com. So ALYSSASEC. There you'll find like my speaking engagements and different stuff. You can contact me with a contact form there. And then, as far as other things to check out, I've got a book coming up. It's available for early purchase. And by purchasing it early, my publisher does something really cool. You get immediate electronic access to a draft copy of what's available so far. So I think we've got five chapters available right now, that if you buy the book, you can pre-purchase either the print copy or the electronic copy, but you get access to it now as I'm still finishing up the book, as we're still making edits. So you can start reading it now. And what's really cool about that is if you want to send me feedback, you can send me feedback and say, you know what, Alyssa, you totally missed it in chapter 2. That was the worst chapter I've ever read. If you can make it a little more constructive than that so I can make it better, that'd be great. But you have that opportunity. So, definitely check that out too. But yeah, happy to, I guess I should tell you, it's from Manning Publications, and it's the Cyber Defender's Career Guide.
Cyber Defender's Career Guide. That's awesome. Oh, and there have been some comments about how your guitars are awesome, and I concur.
I like them. They keep me happy. That's why they're in here. When I get really, really frustrated, just grab a guitar for a while.
Yes. And I'm just going to quickly show your book link, but we also put in the chat so people could copy it, but in case someone else later is like, how do I find the Cyber Defender's Career Guide? This is how.
There you go.
Thank you.
The other way you can do it actually easier, if you go to alyssa.link/book. That one's even easier to remember. So alyssa.link/book. No, Dwayne, I'm not going to play a song.
Yeah, but that was a really good try, though. I appreciate that. We would have had to make her up differently and get ready for that. It's not fair to spring this on her, but oh my gosh, can you imagine? I'm like, I'll go get one of mine. It'll be great.
I mean, I've actually got the rig here. I could almost do it if I was ready to go, but yeah. Alyssa.link/book. I see that up there. Just a warning. It's /book, but
book. Okay.
So .link is the TLD. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. And I knew it was going to get a little goofy. There it is. That's the one. So yeah, if you go to
Awesome.
that, that'll actually forward you right to where you can make a pre-purchase for the book. So
Nice. I gotta get a better link. That seems very wise. It does.
it makes it a little
Note to
easier to
self.
get there. So yeah.
Yeah. So there are lots of thank yous in the chat. Thank you, and let's wave goodbye. Thank you for coming to this week's edition of the We Hack Purple podcast with special guest Alyssa Miller, who told us all about what it is like to be a BISO, and the B stands for business. This episode, just like many episodes before it, was sponsored by ThreadFix, which is powered by Denim Group. And in case you did not get the message throughout this podcast, I am doing my book live stream on Saturday. Yes, that's right. This Saturday, so soon, June 12th, and we're going to talk about secure coding. Aaron Lord from Hella Secure, and Sharif Kusa from OWASP Ottawa, and the company Reshift. And I'm pretty excited to have my friends on and just the chance to be a nerd. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next